how was the lighthouse developed over time from the beginning of the start in 1797?
Okay, so 1797, or actually just prior to that, Alexander Hamilton was kind of the person who got the big lighthouse kick going because a lot of ships with trade and cargo were sinking. He was the Secretary of the Treasury, so everybody was losing money. So he lobbied George Washington to start installing lighthouses along the East Coast. Washington, seeing the wisdom in that, signed a commission to build the lighthouse here at the highest end of the Cape. The original tower was wooden. It was octagonal, and they used a mixture of whale oil and some other lard and renderings. It was nowhere near as bright or as effective as what later came after. One of the tricks that they tried to do was they installed reflectors, mirrors on the back to try to increase the number of flame that could be seen. The flame was mostly exposed to the air. They put some shading around it, so keeping it lit was a big challenge. So that's one of the things that the first keeper, Isaac Small, and his family would have to be continually coming out to check. And based on what conditions, if there was a gale, it probably would be out more than it was on, and the gales are when you need it the most. They built this in 1857. They were able to put in first order Fresnel lens, and Fresnel lenses were designed in France by Augustin Fresnel. And what made them unique was the pattern that was in the glass. It was a series of bullseyes in the center and prisms in the corner. And what it could do is it could take a relatively modest source of light, cause it to reflect and refract back on itself. You get about 80% of the light focused on a very strong, intense beam whose power increases over distance. So you could be up in the lantern room and look at it and not be blinded. But further out it could be seen at sea. It was around that time that they switched, I guess somewhere between 1831 and 1857, they switched from whale oil to what could charitably be called lard, which would only burn in its liquid form. And they were very cautious about having any open flame up in the lantern room aside from the candles themselves, because of the oil, and they were terrified that there'd be a fire. So one of the tasks that the keeper would have to do would be at the bottom of the tower to boil the lard and then carry 2 giant buckets of boiling lard upstairs to pour into the pans to light the candle.
So you said in the beginning how George Washington was one who commissioned it. How was the funding from the beginning? Was that federal funding?
At that point it was. It's a lot of things were variable based on the lighthouse. Boston Light was initially funded by the city of Boston for the same reason that Hamilton put forth, that they were losing a lot of cargo and trade. Eventually the state of Massachusetts took over Boston Light and the other couple lighthouses. They're up on the North Shore in Maine, which was part of Massachusetts then. And they started, I think it was 1794, 1795, they began turning control of the lights over to the federal government. It was the Department of the Treasury that first had them, and again, because of the trade. So the money for the light here were federal funds. I don't know the exact number, but they allocated, let's say, like $7,800. The cost came in about $7,200. It's one of the government projects that came in on time and under budget.
Yeah, that's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
To be honest.
So
when did that start to change? Like when it wasn't federally funded anymore?
Well, so it's still basically federally funded. So the Department of the Interior was involved with some, and the Navy was involved in some. After World War II, they fell under the custodianship of the Coast Guard. And so funds for repairs or building would be through the military forces, the Navy or the Coast Guard, depending who had it. Eventually, the Coast Guard had all of them. They currently, for example, our lighthouse, it's a bit of an anomaly because the land we're located on and the building you and I are sitting in is owned by the national parks. The actual lights and anything used to make that function, so the cabling, the fuse boxes, a couple other pieces of equipment here, are still owned and maintained by the Coast Guard. So if this window behind us cracks, National Parks pays for it. If something goes wrong with the light upstairs, it's the Coast Guard who has to deal with it.
Yeah.